Hey guys, it's Dean. Welcome to the Better Man podcast. Today I'm once again joined by Andrew Daniel, who is the author of Awaken to Your True Self. And today we're going to try doing this interview a little bit differently. So, in the past, what I've realized is these episodes go so long that we need two episodes. And rather than asking Daniel a bit more questions specifically about his work, I wanted to actually do some of them. So, as long as you are here listening to this intro, that means that this interview was approved for release and we're going to go deep. We're going to do the work. So anyways, Andrew, thanks for doing this with us.
Thanks for having me, Dina, and thanks for the courage to go here.
Yeah, I mean, so just full context for everyone listening. So it's been about 5 days since we decided we had to put my dog down, Flotron, after about a year struggling with brain cancer and dementia, a lot of downs, one brief up period, another down period. Uh, he told me it was time. You know, I've heard this from a lot of people I've talked with, but he looked me in the eyes and he said, "I don't want to suffer anymore." And things just got worse after that, and I realized, okay, we got to go. So we took him to the pet hospital. We, you know, called ahead of time. The room was already prepped. Went through the whole process. Took him into the back. Came back out with an IV. We said our goodbyes, and then I left without my dog. And I'm only able to talk about this right now in this kind of level voice because I've been, exploring all these feelings and confronting all this grief and going through it over the past few days. So this is all to say that, Andrew, I'm already in a very vulnerable place right now. So it should make your work easier, but it should also, you know, I don't know. So, anyways, that's where I'm at. And I'm looking forward to trying this out.
Great, let's do it.
Okay. So, first off, I kind of wanted to get people a sense of how this work is different from a lot of typical self work. So, my familiarity with this realm would be in, typical talk based psychiatry. I have a standing weekly or biweekly appointment with a therapist who I, just sometimes we talk about general issues that show up in my life in repeated ways. Sometimes we talk about specific incidents. But generally, it is me talking, them listening, and then kind of rephrasing back to me what they're hearing or trends that they're noticing as I'm going through these things. And that's about a 15-minute session. And that's what it is. So, how is the work that you do different from that?
Great. So let's start off with, what is the work that I do? The process that I go through, and I'm the founder of, is called Cinesomatics. And so most people probably haven't heard of this. It's a fairly advanced and cutting edge process. Um, but because of that, we're on the leading edge of what's actually working. So it's not a belief based system, even though there's a lot of spiritual components to it. It's not an evidence based system, even though there's plenty of evidence. It's a results based system. And what I mean by that is there's no dogma, there's no blind belief or faith, and there's also no avoidance of what works because of stigma, taboo, or dogma. We do what works, obviously within the realm of morals and ethics, but what works is within the realm of morals and ethics. And so let's start with the name, Cinesomatics. So Cine comes from cinema, right? Video. And somatics, meaning of the body. So right off the bat, you can tell that this is a very different approach than a mental talk therapy. Now, we still talk, and there is therapeutics, um, but we go about it from the body rather than the mind. And so, how a typical session or process like this would work, which gives you a good idea of what it actually looks like, is what we do is instead of sitting around and talking for things, um, which talking is a part of it and it is helpful, But oftentimes what happens is that it can take a long time. It just takes a long time to talk through things and to go back and forth over weeks, months, even years, a lot of people experience. And so what we do instead is actually get somebody up and having them move. So I'll have them shake their hands, walk around the room. We have dancing. We have a slack line diagnostic where people walk in a line. And so we have all of these different movements individually or partner or in a group. And we film this. And so when we do it in person, we have very high end cinematography equipment, the same stuff used in Hollywood movies. And so we're able to capture all of this data in the video. And then what we do is after they're done moving, after we've filmed it, we all come back, sit down, and then we play the video back. And so what I do is rather than analyzing things like body language or having a checklist and saying, all right, well, your face is tilted 12 degrees this way. Well, that means this. Instead of doing that, what I'm doing is getting out of my head and dropping down into my body. And instead of analyzing, I'm feeling. So I'm looking at the client, I'm feeling the movement. And from that feeling of the movement, I'm able to observe unconscious, subconscious patterns, stories, blocks, belief systems, traumas, shadow material, archetypes. I'm able to see these things through the movement of the body. And then I reflect that back to the client. So it's not advice, it's not right or wrong, it's not good or bad, it's not my opinion. I am simply acting like a mirror and reflecting back and making this unconscious, emotional, mental, maybe energetic, spiritual material conscious for them. So, as Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it'll run your life and you'll call it fate. This is a modality that lets that unconscious become conscious and allows you to make new choices to determine your fate. Now, with all of that said, the power of the video lies in the ability of the client being able to see this for themselves in their own body. So it's not just trusting a therapist. It's not blindly following a guru or an authority. Yes, the feedback I give is really good and really accurate, but you do not have to just trust what I'm saying. Obviously, I hope that they trust it because it's accurate. That's why they're working with me. But you do not have to rely on that alone. You get to see it for yourself on video. If I give the feedback, then you look at the video and yourself moving and say, oh, wow, yeah, there it is. And
Mm.
so through that process, it creates this feedback loop and it's very fast, very accurate. And because of that, very advanced and very confronting. So it is not a beginner kind of work. It is stuff that reveals things that a lot of people spend a lot of their life trying to hide and suppress. But it's
Mm.
because of that that we get such incredible results. We have tremendous healing and it lasts, right? It's not just coming in and dealing with surface level stuff. We go to the root of everything, we reveal all of it, and we have clients not get rid of it, not try to delete it, not try to cut it out of them, all that bad stuff they don't want anymore. It's not about getting rid of it, it's about feeling it. And when you go into it and feel it, you start integrating it. You start regaining all of those resources that were lost by suppressing it, avoiding it, drugging it out, numbing it out, etc. So the entire process is not only revelatory, but it's also healing. And it's also not just healing, it also uh, helps the client become more functional. Because there's a lot of times that we do healing work. Great, you feel better, but you don't necessarily know how to make more money. You don't necessarily know how to talk to strangers better. Your relationships don't necessarily improve. And vice versa, with traditional self help, sure, you're improving yourself, but there's not necessarily healing. There's not necessarily a transformative healing aspect to it. So, this is a process that brings together that healing and personal transformation along with becoming more functional in your own life. And we do that through video, through feedback, through movement, and through feeling.
Okay. Cool. One thing that I was thinking about as you were talking about that is it's the opposite of total opposite of non-movement. You think of the 1950s or 1960s psychiatry appointments where you're on the couch and you're not
Yeah.
able to move, right? So this is like, no, we're actually going to, this is all it is going to be is movement. So that's cool. So, you know, I don't want to prime myself any one way or another, but I am curious, maybe after this is we can ask like what are common things that come up for people. But maybe right now I'm just terrified of you doing this process. So let's
Great.
right, because like why not just do it? Why not just do it on your own when you can make it public? Because that makes
Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Take it away, Chief.
All right. So, one of the things before we begin is this process. We normally have a video replay component. So we're gonna be doing it a little differently here because we're not
Hmm.
recording it and playing it back immediately. So that is actually a big part of the process. So this isn't going to be
Hmm.
necessarily the full 100% experience because it is very helpful to watch the replay of yourself.
Okay.
But so we're going to adapt it to that, and I'll be giving you more real time feedback. So this will look different than a traditional first few call kind of thing,
Hmm.
but you'll be able to get the idea of how it works. All right.
Okay.
So as we get into this, as I said, how this works is I'm going to be giving you feedback. And so I'm just going to have you do a few basic movements and we'll just go with whatever comes up. So neither of us know what's coming up. There may be some ideas, right? You're going through a grieving process. There's some fear and grief. So that may come up. It's probably right there on the surface. But besides that, we'll see what happens. So, do I have permission to give you feedback and tell you what I'm seeing?
Yes.
Awesome, great. All right, so we're gonna do a little bit of two different diagnostics. The first one's called basically a handshake diagnostic. We're just gonna have you move your hands. Your hands are how you actualize yourself in the world. And then the second part we're gonna do is an archetype diagnostic. And that one we're going to go into specific ways that you embody concepts. So,
Mm.
certain ways that you embody these archetypes in life are going to determine the results you get. So, we'll start with the first movement first and go through that one. Then we'll talk about it a little bit. Then we'll hop into the archetype one after that so you can kind of see the difference. Okay?
Okay.
All right, so what I'm going to need you to do is scoot back a little bit.
Move this.
Yeah, yep, I just need to see you from the top of your head to your thighs. That's good, right about there. Yeah, up a little bit. Perfect. Great. All right, so before we get into anything, let's just have you stand there for a minute. So, as I said, we're going to do this a little differently because we don't have the replay or anything. So, let me ask you, while you're standing there, what are you feeling? What's your experience? What are the stories, judgments, thoughts, feelings coming up?
So as I'm standing there, I'm thinking, what is, what is he going to see? Is he going to see, is he going to see that like I'm standing a certain way? Am I giving off enough? Am I giving enough confidence to seem masculine, or do I look like I'm overdoing it? Do I look neutral? Um, or do I, yeah, I think that's the thing that I'm thinking about as I'm standing is like, as I stand here, do I look like I'm giving off a strong appearance, or do I look weak, or do I look like I'm trying to give off too strong of appearance?
Got it. So, yeah, with that, you notice that you are trying to manage your image, right? Trying to manage how the space is perceiving you.
Hmm.
And so that puts you up in your head, right? Because rather than actually being present and spontaneously expressing yourself, you're trying to manage how you appear to the world.
Mm. Okay.
So, with that, then you start to ask, all right, so what happens if you were not perceived in those ways?
Mm.
So, what would happen if someone perceived you as maybe too feminine or not enough masculine or over masculine?
Oh, weird. Now I have like cold tingles. um, if that were to happen, I'm thinking,
Yeah. So, I'm going to pause you here. So, notice you're going like this,
yeah.
thinking up there. So, in this work, one of the things that we do very differently is help people who think a lot, who are amazing thinkers, but not feelers, get out of their head and into their body. Oftentimes, when we are in our heads, uh, one of the things we're doing is avoiding actually going into the feeling.
Hmm.
So I'll invite you to go into the feeling and speak from the feeling instead of thinking about it.
Okay. Yeah, fear that I'm being perceived as not strong, or overly feminine, or or being able to being able to be taken advantage of, or being perceived as someone who could be
Yep, go back into your body. You went up into your head.
someone who could be taken or dominated,
Yeah,
or somehow controlled, or manipulated, or told what to do, things
right.
that I don't want to do.
Yeah. Yeah, so a fear, and not feeling safe, not trusting.
Hmm.
Yeah, the other thing that's coming through is that you're really hard on yourself.
Hmm.
There's a real intensity into the way you treat yourself.
Yeah.
So then let me ask you this. What would happen if you weren't intense with yourself? What would the consequence of that be?
I would fail. I would lose everything.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be successful with my business. I wouldn't be a good partner. I wouldn't be a good father. I wouldn't be useful to anyone.
So you can see there's a massive incentive and fear and pressure in order to be, to be hard on yourself.
Hmm.
So, what would happen if instead you were compassionate with yourself?
If I were compassionate with myself, I'd be able to be myself. I wouldn't have to, I wouldn't be concerned about the appearance that I'm giving off or the, I wouldn't be as concerned with my success.
Would you lose those other things that you got from being hard?
Quite possibly. I might. Maybe not at this point,
Yeah.
but I might not be here. I wouldn't be, I wouldn't have been able to study to the extent that I did or to be the athlete to the extent that I was. I wouldn't have been able to train myself as hard.
Yeah.
Um,
So just yes. So the thing you want to see here is that you have all of that stuff wrapped up in being hard on yourself. So there's all of these secondary gains you get from this intensity and um, pressure that you put on yourself. And so from
mhm.
your place of being, it almost feels like if you stopped all of that pressure on yourself, it actually feels almost like you wouldn't be here. It's almost annihilating.
Yeah. I mean, if I didn't have pressure on myself, I don't even know. Yeah. I mean, I don't even know what that would look like.
Yeah.
That's how I've been forever.
Yeah. So the thing, so the thing with that is that what, and we'll actually play with this. Um, the way you've grown up, you've this is just the model of reality, right? This is just, oh, well, you just have to be hard on yourself. It's not even, maybe it's not even a bad thing. Like, that's good because it's going to get you all this. It's going to make you perform. It's going to make you provide. But then you look under it and say, all right, well, if I don't do this and I don't provide, well, am I useful to anybody? Well, then what value do I have?
Hmm.
And so we learn intellectually, right? Oh, I still have value, sure. But what's the feeling? The fear is that, what worth do I have if I can't provide and perform all this way? And how am I going to perform and provide all this if I'm not hard on myself? Right? So you just see how it just chain reacts.
Hmm. Yeah. There's a
And
difference between knowledge and integration into your body.
exactly. And that, what you just said, is what I call embodiment. So a lot of people have different terms and ideas for this word. But that's really what embodiment is, actually taking this stuff and having it in your body, not just living it and practicing it, but it actually being in your muscles, your bones, your skin, your body.
Hmm.
So, all right, so that was just kind of the standing there. We haven't done any movement yet, but this,
Oh, good. It
this,
gets worse.
um, so this is just kind of the first little bit that comes through from you standing there. Um, the other great thing, not the other great thing, um, but what else I noticed is that you were fairly still. There wasn't a lot of anxiety, and so that's really great to see. However, my only concern would be that that stillness came from that pressure rather than true peace,
Mm.
right? Do you find that stillness from holding yourself in place or from surrender and peace?
I'm thinking. I find it
Yes.
from practice. I find it from practice. I find it from discipline
Yep.
of practicing being still. Um, I don't know if I felt anxious while I was standing here. I think I was curious about what was being perceived, but I didn't feel curious about what was being perceived, you know, fearful of judgment, but I didn't feel anxious.
Yep. Great. Yeah, I didn't see that either. Good. And so you get to see that there are tremendous benefits from practicing it, from putting in the time, putting in the work. And that is absolutely important. Um, we just want to uncover, is it from this fear place or is it from a peace place? And so
Mm,
we can do a lot of stuff from a dysfunctional place that really serves us, right? It's like working hard is great. It produces a lot of functional things. But are you martyring yourself in the process? Those are the things that we want to check in, right? Are you martyring yourself, sacrificing, doing what's necessary? Absolutely, that's very noble. But is it really necessary, or is it just feeding into a story that it's never enough, or whatever that is,
mhm,
right? So those are the things that we kind of want to just explore and take a look at. And none of it is right or wrong, and none of it's good or bad. It's just, well, what I've discovered watching people that make millions and millions and millions of dollars, they're very, very successful in business, is that the the pressure, the force, motivation only goes so far. It has an upper limit. It can't take you all the way. It can get you really far, and it can get you a lot farther than being lazy and depressed and all of that stuff. But what got you here isn't going to get you there. And so in order to have the highest levels of success in love, relationships, family, money, whatever, it that needs to come from surrender. It needs to come from trust and love and peace. Otherwise, if you even manage to get there, what happens is that you'll take yourself out. You'll feel like an imposter. You won't trust. You'll be afraid someone's going to steal from you, take you out. So all of those things start just amplifying the higher you get in your success.
mhm. Yeah, makes sense.
Great. All right. So let's have you step back and we'll start some of that movement. Great. So all I'm going to have you do is start shaking your hands. Just start shaking your hands and I'll tell you when to stop or change. Okay. Go bigger. Yeah. Bigger. Yeah. So, yeah, you can pause for a second. So when you were first starting, um, it's very, very down kind of in the underworld, right? So so a lot of this work is symbolic. Our body doesn't have words. It is a symbolic thing. Um, everything, our subconscious works in symbols. Our dreams are all symbolic. And so if you kind of imagine the body, from the head and down to kind of the torso and the hips, that's sort of earth, right? We're not talking about some esoteric stuff. This is just kind of metaphor, symbolic. And then, below the hips, that's more the underworld, right? And then above the head, that's maybe heaven, right? Just conceptually. And so the feeling when you first started, um, there was this relaxation because obviously of the work you do. You're very solid. You're very in your body. There's a density to you. um, which is great. That's a good thing. There's a lot of people that don't have a density and they're floating out into the ethers, and you're like, where are you? So you're very here. The thing that we're seeing though is that it's very kind of depressed, and it feels like a lot of that that pressure. You know, there's something that comes along with that that is preventing levity. And so there's almost a certain feeling that you're not allowed to play or to actually have real joy. Just as a default. It doesn't mean you never experience it. Doesn't mean you can't. But there's just this certain feeling that that levity, that ease and grace isn't by default accessible to you all the time.
Hmm. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
the next thing that happened is that you started to get bigger. And so the next level of getting big, that sort of second stage, um, as you move your hands up and down, in and out, it also reveals what you're taking in or giving out. And so the hand movements are all symbolic, right? This is the way you're moving your hands is the way you're managing your life, right? This is how you're actualizing stuff. So if you look on video, for people listening, um, my hand is here kind of flaccid, right? It's shut. It looks, we would call this shut down. Now imagine I had something in life that I wanted. Now, if this is the way symbolically I show up and relate to life, this is what I want, right? My hand is just hitting the glass. It is dead. It is turned off. I can't actually grab what I want. If my hand is open like this and I see what I want, I can come in and I can grab it. If my hand is open but is anxious and hysterical and afraid and nervous and freaking out, and I come over like this, I'm not going to be able to grab it either, and there's water going to spill everywhere. So that is a complete symbolic correlation between what is happening in the body and the results that we get in our life. So if we walk around shut down, we're not going to be able to actualize ourselves in the way that we want. If we're walking around anxious and freaking out, we're not going to be able to hold on to those things in our life. Correlated to the hands. Now, every different part of the body represents something else. So, hands, pretty obvious, right? None of this stuff has to be metaphysical or esoteric or woo woo. It can be if you want it to be, but it doesn't have to be. You just think practically. Your feet, right? What are your feet? Your feet connect you to the earth. They keep you standing, they move you around. And so the way that you have your feet are going to reflect how you are supported, how you stand your ground. All of these words and phrases that we use in our language, they're very, very symbolic. They actually apply when I watch clients moving around. These things like, oh, this person looks like they got a stick up their ass, or that person's uptight, or that person's always leaning to the side or leaning on walls. Well, maybe they're codependent. Maybe they cannot stand up on their own 2 feet, right? Put your shoulders back. All of these things. When you actually do this therapeutic work, you see that many of them actually correlate to real life results. That's where we get them from.
Hmm. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So the second kind of phase that you did of getting bigger felt pretty good. Again, it was a bit down, and so it's not right or wrong or good and bad. There's clients that I see that never let themselves go down there, right? They're terrified of going down into that darkness. For you, it feels like you live mostly down there. in kind of that dark, intense, I don't want to say brooding, but it's it's a bit of this like down in it.
Yeah, I kind of laugh because I do spend that was what, I have, I in the past I have journaled about like, well, what am I going to do to how am I finding joy in life? Where is there play? And a lot of what I default to with my free time is, okay, I'm going to go journal. I'm going to go walk and do some reflection. I'm going to go
Yeah.
work out. I'm going to go do sauna, or I'm going to do cold plunge and work on my breathing. And, there is not, yeah, play is more difficult to access.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what we've talked about so far, it makes total sense, right? Because play doesn't lead to the performance, validation, all of that pressure that you have on yourself. And so it's kind of in the way that you have it set up in your mind, in your body, it's in opposition to it. And so it's almost like going into the play, you're abandoning all of that stuff. And it's going to fall apart. It's going to get taken from you. You would never have had it, any of this kind of stuff.
Right. Even though intellectually I completely understand that play
Exactly.
is important for overall health and even, yes, even all those things that are very important to my lower
Yeah.
self.
Yeah, but just notice what you said. Play is important to overall health. That's not what play's about.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's
right.
like it's like learning to dance, for some personal development reason. Oh, my business is going to get better if I start dancing. It's like, yeah, sure. All right. But dance to dance, right? And when you dance,
Mhm.
it's not like, oh, I'm going to dance in order to improve myself. You're removing all the play from dance. And so it's like
Mm.
you just literally remove the play from playing.
Yep.
Yeah. Because it always has to go back to how do I get value out of this? How does this improve myself so I can perform better? Now, there's probably
Mhm.
nuance and other stuff, but just to keep it simple here. Um, so, all of these things are a threat to that ego story, right? To that whole myth. So, a
Mhm.
story is essentially just, some narrative we've created about what we've experienced in the past or about how life works, right? We have some experience, somebody tells us something, we see something, we have a trauma, we experience these things. And instead of just reporting the details, my dad was abusive and hard on me. Okay, great. It's my dad was abusive, hard on me, or he left and he was never around. And so that means X about me. I'm not lovable. In order to have my dad's love and approval, I have to be harder on myself, whatever it is. I'm not saying that's necessarily you, just as an example, right? So we create these narratives, we create these stories around what happened, and all of them have some emotional component to it. And so a mythology is an overarching kind of archetypical story, right? So think rather than a scene in a movie, the theme of the movie. And a lot of these get passed down generationally in our family through cultures and societies. So certain societies, cultures, families, they have certain mythologies, right? Oh, we're the so and so's. We're like this, right? Oh, this never happens. Oh, no Hortons do this, or there's all of these narratives about the family and who they are and what it means and what's possible and what's not possible and why things are the way they are. And we do this to try to understand and figure out the world. The problem is almost all of them are inaccurate, right? They're not reality, they're not the truth. And so what happens, instead of getting true results and living in reality, we live in distorted fantasies, right? We live in these distorted realities that say, if I'm not hard and forceful on myself, I'm going to lose this stuff and I'll never get here. Oh, if I have play, I can't just play. I have to turn it into this or else, whatever. We mold our experience of reality through the lenses of these stories. And so in this work, one of the things that makes it different than most stuff out there, like positive psychology, is we're not spinning a better story. We're not turning it into a positive. We're stopping the stories altogether. It's not, oh, you feel bad because of this, and it's okay to do that because of this. No, it's just you feel bad. All right, feel it. Yeah, but then I
Hmm.
need, no, stop. Nope, none of that. You just report the details. You just report what you feel. You feel it without whipping up all of these justifications and stories and narratives. Even better ones, positive ones, they're still not real. They're better, right? Reframing positive, you're going to have a better life, but it's still not reality. It's still not true. And so the closer you can get to reality and the truth, the more accurate life that you live, which means that when you go to take an action, you get the action that you expect rather than something completely different. You go up to someone, you think you're being kind and generous to them, they treat you like crap, and that happens every week. It's probably not them, it's you. And so what's happening is in your mind, you think you're being one way, but in your body, the reality is a completely different way.
Hmm.
And so if you can find the truth and rewire that, you're going to get much better results in your life.
Hmm. Yeah. Nothing to
Great.
add.
Yep.
I'm just
So
I'm listening.
perfect. So the third getting bigger that you did with your handshaking, that's where things changed. Because that second layer worked. Right? That second one, it felt good. You were going up, down, there was an in and out. You were still kind of in that underworld feeling. And then when you started to get into maybe the upper world, into kind of the everyday world, what happened was you started, you looked down, you were staring down, you lost your vision, and all of the things you were doing, it was dumping it. So at that third level of getting bigger, you started dumping everything, throwing it to the ground, and you were looking right at where you were throwing it down. So that tells us that you can get a little bit bigger, but once you get to another level of bigness in your intimacy, into your business relationships, then you start throwing it away. You start dumping it, taking yourself out in certain ways.
Hmm.
So let's have you scoot back, and we'll do that again so you can feel it and see it.
Yeah. I guess I was just thinking it felt like as I'm shaking my hands, I didn't feel like I was shaking my hands up. I felt like I was throwing my hands down.
Exactly. Yep. And that feeling translates to, imagine you had dollars in your hands. Imagine you had love in your hands. That's what you're doing with it. Great. So try that again. Yeah, do what you were doing before. Don't try to change it, just so we can get that reference. Okay, so get bigger. Go bigger. Okay, bigger. Yeah, right. So bigger, even bigger. Yeah, okay, so this is really interesting. Wow, this is amazing. So normally what we normally what we'd expect is that you um it would just intensify. The thing that you were doing, it would just get bigger and bigger, but it completely changes. Um Once you get to a certain point of bigness, you completely disconnect. And so it almost feels like you're not even here anymore. So if someone's in front of you, people watching this, you can see that when you get that big, you're up here, and it's not connected to anything real. And so it is almost like there's this break point where you go from well, this is reality and it has to feel like this. And then up here, this is just fantasy land where I'm making $100 million. Yeah.
Okay.
Do you get
Yeah,
that
it did.
sensation?
Yeah, it felt totally different. It could
Yeah.
be because my shoulders annoy me right now, and that like if I lift my arm in a certain way, it didn't feel good. So it could be because it just didn't feel good to do that. But yeah, it felt like there was this. It felt like there was like suddenly this permission to like, okay, like go crazy, do it, like just be totally different from what you usually are, and like put your arms up high and wave, and like you look silly and nobody cares, and
Yeah. So that's really interesting too. So that tells us that how you normally are is suppressing all of that,
hmm
right? That's not your normal way of being, of just do what you want and be silly, nobody cares.
yeah, that's for it's for dancing. That's
And
for
what's
dancing
dancing for?
situations.
Yeah.
Dancing is for overall wellness. We discussed this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but what's the
Uh,
story? What is, who dances? Does a
who
successful
dances?
business father dance or not?
People who are who people who can dance. People who can dance well dance. People who have control over their bodies and can look cool in public while they do it, and have the
Yeah.
skills to do it. Those people dance.
Yeah. Is that you?
When I was younger and I really could dance, yeah, and I used to do it all the time, yeah.
Yeah.
But there was always a self-conscious behind it. There was always a like, okay, like as soon as I stop feeling cool doing this, I'm not going to dance.
Mm.
It's always a performance, even if
Yep.
I'm like, there's always a performance. It's
Yep.
never like a just doing it for fun. It's always like a performance.
Yeah. And that's exactly what we talked about in the beginning about the that image, right? Managing your image. That's exactly what that is too. Trying to be cool, looking this way, performing. So yeah, there's this huge performance myth for you, whether it's performing for a certain image or to have value. And this is all something that is, a coping mechanism, to keep you safe, right? So you're not rejected, so you don't die, so you keep your relationships, so you have all this stuff. But you can see
hmm
it's not based in joy, it's not based in fun, it's based in survival.
Hmm. Well, good.
Oh, great. But what's interesting too is that you see that there's that disconnect, and when you let yourself go there, you went there, but you lost the connection to the earth. You lost connection to that actually being a real thing. It was like, in order to go there, you have to disconnect from this Dean and go to some other place.
Hmm. Yeah.
Great. All right. So scoot back. Yeah. Don't have any fun here, right? Don't. Okay. So the next thing that we're going to have you do is the archetypes. And so what I discovered doing this work, and as far as I know, this is an original kind of discovery. This isn't out anywhere that I've seen. Is that the body has its own somatic archetypes. So, for example, if I say uh, banana or elephant or grandma, there's an image, a sound, a taste, a smell, a feeling that you have in your mind, right? Elephant. Oh, there's a sound, there's a shape, an image, all this stuff. That's what's called in psychology an internal representation, right? In our IR. This is just how we internally represent some concept. Well, what I discovered is that not only do we have an internal representation in our mind, but our body has its own somatic representation of these concepts. And it's symbolic, it's beyond words. And with this discovery, why that's important is because I found out that it's not how we see things in our mind that correlates to the results. It's how we represent it into our body that correlates with results. So, for example, if in your mind, Dean, you think you're a happy go lucky light person, and then we see this depression in your body, the reality is closer to that depression than it is to the image in your mind. Does that make sense? Yeah. So, this is a way to bypass years and years of coaching and therapy and talking about this, where you're just in your head discussing these things. Instead, we look at the body because the body tells the truth, right? The body doesn't lie, especially when you start moving. Now, I could stand here and pose and not move, and it could appear a certain way, right? Posing for a photo, this kind of thing. But what do we call those people who pose?
Yes.
Yeah, posers, right. And so when you start moving, you can't fake that, right? There's thousands and thousands of movements going on in each second compared to a pose. And so there's no way to sustain faking that. So all of that data leaks out, all of that truth leaks out through the movement. So what we're going to do here, we're just going to do a few of these archetypes just so you can get a feel for it and what that looks like. Okay, so the instructions are I'm going to give you an archetype, and what you're going to do, rather than going into your head and thinking about it, you're going to go into your body, find the feeling of this archetype, and through movement, express this archetype in your body without speaking or making sounds.
Okay.
All right, so you're going to go down, find the feeling of this archetype, what your body wants to express, and through movement, you're going to express that without talking. Okay? All right, and you're going to keep doing it until I tell you to stop. So show me giving. Yeah, let's have your eyes open.
Okay.
Yeah, so keep doing this. And so what we're, again, normally we would just film this and then replay it so you would see it on video. But the feeling here, so this is accurate. So this does feel like giving. So it's not a distortion, there's not a reverse wiring. But the feeling is that it's never enough. You're just constantly giving more and more and more and more. So do it again. See if you can see that as you move.
I felt it.
Okay. Okay, great. Yeah,
Completely. Yeah.
great. So does that show up in your life?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you can
Yeah.
come talk
You know,
about it.
there's never. Yeah, all the time. No, I've never do enough for. I never knew do enough at home. I never do enough for my wife. I never do enough for my business. Uh, I never do enough for myself. I don't do enough of the self care that I want to do. I don't. I don't read enough. I don't give enough. I don't practice these things enough.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah.
and and so the interesting part of that um is that comes from inside, right? It doesn't feel like the world around you is saying, "Dean, how come you should be more giving? You should do more in your business." It really feels like that comes from some internal standard.
hmm I think I look for the validation of that in certain places. Like
Yeah.
I can think of my wife. being, a new mom, and I can think of all the things that I do, and then her, regardless of how much I do, she's still going to be, she's still going to be stressed because she's a new mom. But to me, it's like, I'm not doing enough, and now you're unhappy, and it's my fault, and
Yeah.
you know, this is I should have done more. I can be doing more. Let me just do more, you know.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
it's
More. Yeah.
never done like,
Yeah.
I've done it, I'm
Yeah.
good. Like, now you're happier. Now I can be content with myself. It's like I have to keep
Yeah.
giving more, trying to recharge myself so I can give more, trying to better
Yeah.
myself so I can keep giving more.
Okay. Perfect. All right. Now scoot back. And this time, so do that giving thing again that you were just doing the same way. Okay. Now, this time, do it in a way that it is enough, that it worked, that you finally did enough. Eyes open. Yeah. So you feel how the hands drop and you leave it out. The feeling here is that, you're waiting for them to receive it. There's a little bit of hopelessness in here,
Hmm.
right? The hands just drop like, oh, I thought this finally would be enough, but they don't want it, or they're not receiving it, or, oh, maybe this wasn't the thing. So now do it this time, and and do it. So show me giving. So show me giving that's enough, and the person validating and receiving it. So what are you feeling here?
uh, Sense of calmness, sense of peace, sense of now I can be open to now I can be open to love. Now I can be open to appreciation. Is there more?
Well, just notice how easy that could be.
Hmm. Well, initially when you asked me to do it, and then um, the first time I tried that, not the first time when I was giving and like I had to keep giving, but the second time you told me to do it, I felt like I was giving, and then I smiled, like, just like naturally without thinking about it. I was smiling because I'm like, now I'm giving enough. Now I'm
Yes.
giving enough. Now it's enough. Now I don't have to go back and find more. Like, I have enough and I'm giving it. And this is making me happy. And this is just bringing me, unfiltered joy to
Yeah.
be able to give enough.
Yeah, it's the most you've smiled on this whole call.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I have,
S-
yeah. I guess I have
s-
my certain habits of how I do phone
Yeah.
calls. So,
Yeah. Well, how you do one thing is how you do everything, right? So this,
yeah.
this is showing up elsewhere in your life. And so this shows you too that one of those ways of being leads to joy and one of them doesn't.
Hmm. Doing less, or it feels like doing less.
But
Um,
but doing it, yeah, from that place where it actually is enough. It's the
Right.
enoughness, right? That's the important part.
Yeah. It's so weird. I feel like my demeanor has totally changed from the start.
Yeah. Yeah, the shifts can happen that fast.
Hmm.
So scoot back and just practice it a little bit. See if you can find that joy place again. You're giving it, and it is enough, and they're receiving you. And if you want to make it more intense, think back, imagine that person, usually a parent or someone like that, where you never felt like it was enough. And now do it this time and just imagine them looking at you, being grateful and saying, that is enough. You are enough while you move. Okay, now scoot back and we're going to do one more thing with this. All right, so after you did this with this person, you're imagining, show me show me being received. Show me being fully received and accepted.
I don't know.
Yeah, okay, good. Come up. So, what we're seeing here, there's this fear of intimacy around this, right? Because when you're intimate, you have to be vulnerable. And you say, well, here I am to be received. And, it's up to the other person to receive you or not. And that feels very vulnerable. And so there's an avoidance of intimacy because, you're just terrified. Yeah.
That's what I'm told.
Well, there you go.
Yep. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. So all that through just some simple movements. And as you got to see, not only did it reveal it, but you could change the way that you moved. You could change the way you showed up in your body. You can make a new choice in your body movements and in the way you felt and related to things. And it actually shifted how you felt. And it actually made a change. You actually could see how that new way of moving and being can translate to something practical and applicable in life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there you go. That's a very, very simple taste of what this approach looks like.
Wow. Yeah, it's powerful. It is it's a practice. It's definitely different than talking about how you feel versus like feeling how you feel.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um I mean, you know, some of those things I could have, I feel like some of those things I knew because I think I've been doing therapy consistently for about 5 years now. So some of that, I was like, well, duh, I could have told you that. But like the uh, you know, being down, feeling and like being up here was not being myself. That was that tracked, but it was not something that I had kind of realized. So,
So remember too, I've I mean, we don't know each other in person. I don't know anything about your life. So the thing to keep in mind is, of course, you know a lot of this stuff yourself. But how do I, in a few minutes of just watching you move, know all of these ways that you're relating to your life? Right? That's the thing to
mhm.
realize. Like, oh, yeah, well,
Which means
because
that
go ahead.
I was going to say that means that even though like I do have, you know, I can think about all of my relationships. So it doesn't matter what I'm saying or doing, but if my constant body language is this instead of what I'm trying to say, then that means there's this huge disconnect and I'm not getting the connections that I'm trying, or like I'm not connecting the way that I'm intending to.
Yeah. And the thing you just did here, where you just did an example of like being up here, you actually smiled. You actually had a little fun. Now, it's not rooted, but it was much lighter. And it's like even when I just gave you this feedback, there was this little blip of joy. And so you know how to get to this light, fun place. You just don't let yourself go there. Because you've distorted it to be something that it's not.
Hmm.
You've said, "Oh, that's not me. Who I am is I'm this person." And
Mm-hmm.
in that process you abandon yourself, right? You're all of it. You're all of it.
Hmm. Yeah, I think there's this. Yeah, I mean, there's this constant, kind of constant need to appear to be this very, you know, confident, strong, productive person, and that makes joy. It makes play. It makes letting my guard down, not just in a sense of like, well, I think of letting my guard down in terms of letting down this level of intensity because I need this in order to be productive and feel valued and feel like I can continue to give. But because of that constant need, I'm not able to go into a place where I can easily give and receive love or just feel relaxed and feel like I can be totally myself without, being scared of judgment somehow. So there.
So there you go.
Cool. Hmm. So how do you, or go ahead if you had something else you wanted to say.
Yeah, no, I was going to say that I encountered something very similar in myself in my business where I've been doing this work for a very long time, and I'm not very old in comparison to other people that are teaching things. Um, so, I was doing this stuff in my 20s, and I was teaching sexuality. I was teaching, this kind of stuff. And I had this story, this belief that people have to take me seriously, because who's this kid, that is teaching this advanced stuff? Who's going to take him seriously, right? So it was just like I didn't feel like people were taking me seriously. I would write posts online, and people would be like, and it's like 2 hours of like with the same kind of things that I put into my book, and I was like, but nobody is taking it seriously, and so that translated to um, doing videos and being with clients. And I felt like I had to suppress that play, that silliness, that fun, and be serious. So people would take me seriously and pay me thousands of dollars. I'm like, nobody's going to pay me $20,000 if I'm laughing and smiling and making jokes and having fun. That's not work. That's not valuable. People don't value having fun. They value doing the hard, intense work. And so I realized this was a problem. And so I do this work myself. That's how I've developed this. I've done this process myself, and I do it every day. I live it. And so I had a girlfriend at the time film me, and the prompt was, show me being on stage teaching this stuff. And so I started doing it. It was like, all right, so cinesomatics is this, and blah 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 blah, and this is really important. Pay attention. And then I looked at the video. I'm like, this guy's a fucking square. Like, this isn't fun to watch. And I was like, oh my god, I'm suppressing all of my personality, everything that makes me me, to have this image up, this narcissistic image up, so people see me a certain way, to take me seriously and professionally, so that they pay me money. And the reality was, nobody wanted to work with me because I was a downer.
Mm.
And I said, oh my God, I'm just suppressing all of my personality in order to have this image of what I think people want. But what I think people want isn't true. It's not real. And so that what you're experiencing here in my own way, I've gone through, and I just realized, oh my gosh, I'm abandoning myself to appear a certain way in order to get certain needs met, in order to be accepted and appreciated and validated in certain ways. But then guess what happens? Even if that image gets validated and loved and it's enough, it's still not really me. And so it's like, all right, everybody loves this serious Andrew. It doesn't, right. I end up being in this imposter syndrome kind of place. It doesn't nourish me. It doesn't fulfill me because it's an image. It's not who I really am. I've had to abandon and depress and suppress parts of myself in order to be loved and accepted. And it may keep you alive and safe in a short term, but in the long term, it just wipes you out. It crushes your soul. And so a lot of what I'm seeing with you and hearing, you say today, um, resonates with that same experience with myself.
Hmm. So I should just keep doing exactly what I'm doing
Yes.
and have a major breakdown in 5 to 10 years, or never, and then just die of some related chronic
Yes. Yeah. Perfect.
inflammatory disease that, okay.
Yeah.
So I either
Sounds like a
change
plan.
or I do that. Okay, I'll just keep doing what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Sounds easy.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
meanwhile, you can hope for a different result
Yeah,
and
I'll
drive
just
yourself
keep doing what
crazy.
I'm doing and hope, yeah, I hope it works out. So, what are some, I don't want to, I don't want to make this conversation take too long. But what, we just went through some of those things. What is the work that, well, I guess let's just talk about me here, but what is the
Yep.
work that I can continue to do to practice this? Or what would
Yep.
be the work that
Yeah.
what are the
Yeah. I, I,
drills or the exercises, so to speak,
yeah.
or
Yeah. Yeah. None of that, because notice all the words work, drills, exercises.
What is the practice? How do
Yeah,
I play with this?
yeah. How do you play with this? Yeah, how can you play with this?
How do I be happy with this? How do I do this happiness practice? Or I don't know
Yeah,
what the
but it's,
word
no,
is. But
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. It's just play, right? I think just play, that turning things into play. That what what is happening right here is one of the things that you can start doing. The work is that throughout your day, instead of referring to all this as work and the drills and how do I force this into being, how can I play with this? Now, Dean, this is an important distinction here. If I was working with somebody else and they never took anything seriously and they were whimsical and their life wasn't functional, whimsical to a dysfunctional degree, right? They were just in their head, everything was a joke, they never took anything seriously. I would be giving them the opposite advice, right? Because they're way over in the other extreme, and you're way over in this extreme, and we want you to get to that harmonious, peaceful place. So, for people listening, this isn't one size fits all advice. All the feedback I give and all the practices are based on the person. They're bespoke to that person, because, well, of just what I said, I think it's self evident.
Mm.
So this is something that I definitely think would be very helpful for you to do, is start just reframing stuff. If you just start to look through things through the lens of play. Now, the thing to to that you're going to want to address while you do that is reshifting your idea of play. Because right now, if you play, you're going to avoid doing that because it feels like you're going to lose all this other stuff, right? And so that's going to be probably the most important thing. It may take some time. There's probably some things you have to go into and penetrate and heal and address with that. Um, but once you can do that, then play becomes something you want to do rather than something you don't want to do. The other thing is that I would suggest start doing is a lot of opposite stuff. We didn't do this here on this call, but one of the things is to do things the opposite way. And if you're normally the down here person, start being the up here person. And you can do that both practicing the movement and figuring out how that translates literally into life, right? So the down here Dean versus the up here Dean. And eventually, by practicing that, it's not an up here, down here. It's just, this is Dean. Dean can go through the full range of movement, all the way high, all the way low. And so it's not just being in one place, positive psychology, only being up here. It's about having access to the whole range when you need it.
Mm. So less hip dancing, more I don't know what this is. Upper
I would,
stuff.
yeah, okay. Well, this is interesting too. When you said that, that's exactly what we saw in your handshaking. So you disconnect from down here in order to be up here. Not, no, don't do that. You stay connected here, stay with the hip dancing, and then add in this range. So you have this as a dichotomy. That's why that's
I'm
when I said,
schizophrenic.
yeah,
Got it.
that so that's why when you did that, when you got too big and you jumped to that place, it felt like we lost you down here. So you want to stay, yes, stay in the hips. I mean,
So
the
I need
hips
to
are
integrate my low
ex-
and my high.
yes.
There's
So
no
stay
connection. It's like there's
exactly, because you have that split. You have that kind of dichotomy. It's an either or. And so you bring those together. You may start by doing it up here just so you can get comfortable with it, and then have them both, right? So you can be up here, and down here. But up here, you're more visible. Maybe you're a little more silly. You can be playful, whatever it is. But you don't abandon the sexuality. You don't abandon the groundedness, right? You can stay masculine and still be silly. That's something I learned the hard way. That took me 15 years to learn. I write about that in my book. where I suppressed my smile because it felt too girly and silly because I thought it wasn't cool. All the cool guys were like, ugh, I'm cool and aloof. And then I realized I was just suppressing my beauty. And then all of a sudden, I go through that process. I have women complimenting all the time about, oh, I love your smile. And I'm masculine. And they're having fun. They're being silly. I'm being silly. They're getting turned on. I'm like, wait a minute, this isn't supposed to work. But it was silly in the context of being a powerful masculine man. It wasn't being silly because I'm just up here and completely disconnected from my lower body, right? You can just hear my difference in there. If I'm down here, but I'm being silly and playful, is being silly and playful down here and still having access to all of this, not abandoning this and going either or. It took me 15 years to learn that one. A lot
Wow.
of
I mean, hey,
suffering.
but that's a big lesson, you know.
Yeah.
That I mean, that resonates. I think that was what I was trying to say, but I didn't know how to say. Um yeah. I mean, they're yeah. I mean, I think it would be totally, what's the word I'm looking for? We would be living in an alternate reality to say that as a society we do not have homophobia,
Yeah.
right? So like if we don't want to be perceived as too feminine and we don't want to be perceived in that way, then that means that we're only going to show ourselves in a masculine way.
And it's usually going to be distorted. They have to come together. So this is the thing too to understand is that it's not just about becoming a masculine man. It's about being a masculine man with an integrated feminine.
Hmm.
It's not about just being a feminine woman. It's about being a feminine woman with an integrated masculine. Because internally we have both polarities. Internally in the body, different um, different sides of the body have different polarities, right? So the right side is the yang, the masculine, and the left side is the yin, the feminine. Different parts of the body have these uh, to them. And so what happens is if we're disconnected and dissociated or rejecting one of those, so if I'm suppressing my feminine, I'm going to move my hands and it's going to be like this, right? So this side is going to be moving a lot and this side is just going to be dead. So all of that actually gets translated through the movements as well. So how someone actually is masculine or feminine, the way they relate to that in themselves and in their partners, all of this comes through the cinesomatic movement as well.
So I have a question for you. So when you look at like let's just pick on like the wannabe alpha community for a second here. When you look at those guys who are like, who have whatever it may be, whatever platform they are on, and they're trying to look super tough, do you look at that and you're like able to look at their body language and
Oh
be
yeah.
like, this is not like, this doesn't make any sense?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And then you see, so then you get to see, um, is it an image or are they really in relationship with their masculine? I'll give you an example that fucking blew my mind. I'll never forget the day. It was so confusing. I remember doing this work in a group, and however we got there, I started to let myself feel very feminine. I was like, all right, this feels very gay. I feel super feminine right now. My legs feel like woman legs. I mean, I just felt just really, and I was very vulnerable, very uncomfortable. And
Hmm.
I felt very feminine. Without prompting, all of the women in the group, they all were like, wow, Andrew, you look so masculine. I'm like, like a Looney Tunes character. What? They're like, yeah, I mean, you look so sexy and masculine. I said, I feel so feminine. They're like,
Huh.
well, you look really masculine. And it was a complete turning point in my life. I'm so grateful for that experience. It changed everything for me because I realized that they have to come together, right? If you're suppressing one and avoiding one, the other one isn't able to show up in the proper way. Because I was so afraid of being feminine, I shut that feminine down, and the result was I actually looked effeminate.
Hmm.
And so it was just amazing how we can get these reverse wirings. That's what it's called, a reverse wiring, where when you feel one way, but it looks and you get the results in the world that are the complete opposite. So when I see these people that are doing this alpha stuff, a lot of them aren't really in relationship with their masculine, right? Maybe their feminine's shut down, but their masculine is all distorted, right? Because masculine isn't necessarily what all these guys think. To them, trying to be masculine, they're shutting themselves down. They have all these guards up. They're putting a narcissistic image out. They're not feeling. They're in their head. None of that helps you be an alpha male. None of that is leading. That's not dominant. That's domineering. That's not leading. It's dictating. So without the yin aspect integrated, the yang becomes tyrannical. It becomes, abusive and distorted. Now, for a lot of men in the world, that's a better choice than being passive and um, submitting and being weak and having no spine and being a doormat, right? So it's very attractive to a certain kind of man who's been rejected, who's been abused, who has no spine, who's weak, who doesn't have that confidence. It looks like a much better way of living than all of that pain and suffering and sadness and patheticness. But they're both suffering. That's the thing. The other one's suffering in a very different way. And I've done both, right? I was that nice guy, and then I became the jerk, the bad boy. Oh, well, I'm having sex. Girls like this better, but there's no intimacy, there's no depth, there's no trust, right? It reached an upper limit really quick because
Hmm.
the things that get you there don't get you to the full thing.
Hmm. So I want to ask you a question. So, you know, I I think I think we've all gone through high school. Not all of us. Many of us has gone through high school. And I think, you know, boys tease each other a certain way. And you talk about in your book how you were bullied a lot, and your strong reaction to not wanting to be perceived feminine or gay. What was Yes, I'm making you be vulnerable now. What was you know what was your experience with that?
What part specifically? Because I
You
was
talked about
bullied
how
and
you
teased for a long time.
right. You
Yeah,
talked about how you spent 15 years trying to be overly masculine in
yeah,
response to that.
yeah,
And I don't know, what was one of the most if there's one part of that you could share, so some significant aspect of that or experience that you could share from that, what was the or maybe you uncovered you talked about, you kind of uncovered the process of that, but what was you know is there anything
yeah,
else from that you could share that you think would be helpful?
yeah. So why did I do that? Well, I didn't want to feel something. Right? I didn't want to feel pathetic. I didn't want to feel like a loser. I didn't want to be unlovable. And really, the biggest thing was um, a story of being unwanted, of being undesirable. And so that affected everything in my life. It affected my intimate life, right? Because I did all of this stuff to try to be more desirable, right? I learned how to give better orgasms. I learned how to, seduce. I learned how to run a business and make money. Like I learned all of these things. And it was kind of like building up a CV, right? I was building up a resume, a CV of how amazing I was. And so I could just meet people and women and be like, see, look, I'm desirable. Um, because feeling undesirable most of my life socially um, sucked. You know, all that rejection, that humiliation, um, just because I had warts on my fingers when I was a kid. And even after they were removed, I just kept that story going. You know, so being 5 years old, 6 years old, and feeling like a leper, you have no idea why. It's never been an issue before, just some bumps on your hands. And now it means all this stuff. And this is why I'm unlovable. And I took that personal. And, you know, I'll be the first to admit that I used that to be a victim. I didn't realize it when I was 6 years old, but I
Mhm.
did. You know, I was a victim. And I kept that victim mentality and I felt sorry for myself for the next 20 years. And so, in order to get to the place where I wasn't doing this anymore, I had to let myself go into feeling undesirable. I had to go into my own shadow and say, all right, I'm avoiding this. It's running my life. Well, let's go into it. All right, let's go into the narcissism. Let's go into the self loathing, the self hatred, right? The loneliness. God, there was a lot of loneliness. You know, and I remember watching porn and feeling, you know, horny, watch porn, you know, finish and feeling worse about myself. It's like, wow, I'm so fucking pathetic. I can't even have a real girlfriend. You know, I have to do this here. And I just made it mean all of this stuff. And then I used it to beat myself up. I used it to hurt myself and to validate why I was a pathetic piece of shit. And so, yeah, so going through all of that stuff and not just dealing with it, but going into it. All right, I would literally stand up and do the movement stuff that you just did, you know, variations of it, and go into all of those things. You know, show me being a pathetic loser, show me being unlovable, going to all of these places so I could face it and penetrate it and heal it. Um, and so it would no longer run my life. Because if there's something here that you don't want to feel, that you're avoiding, guess what? It's going to direct you this way, right? You don't want to go here, so it's going to direct you this way. Guess what? That's directing your life. This thing you don't want to do is directing you in this direction. But when you can go into it and penetrate it, it dissolves. Well, now what? Well, now you get to choose 360. You can get to just pick anywhere that you want to go. And so this isn't directing your life anymore. And so having right that pressure you put on yourself, all of these things that we do, they're directing our life into one path. Maybe it's a path you want to go, that's fine. But I'd rather go into this, penetrate this, not be at the effect of it anymore, and then just get to choose. Oh, do I want to live a life like this? Or do I want to live a life like this? Or live a life like this? Or like this? Or like this? So it's all about bringing the choice back. There's no should or shouldn'ts, right or wrongs, good or bads. It's just about choice. And then you can choose to do things that work, that are more functional or less functional. You can live a life that's with intimacy or without intimacy. You can choose to move in a direction from your choice, but you accept the consequences, right? You're responsible for those choices. And yeah, that just put me on this journey of healing a lot of that rejection and self hatred and loathing and despair, hopelessness, loneliness. Um, and it took time. You know, it did took time, but I did get through it. You know, I did heal it. Um, but it was not fun.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing with me.
You're welcome.
and us. So, all right, really quick, because I thought I forgot to add that, but we just practice the same movements that we've gone through. I just keep practicing those archetypes.
Well, I would play with the ones
Play.
that were different,
Okay.
right? So the one where you started to feel joy, the ones that felt uncomfortable and not normal, those are the ones you want to start playing with and practicing.
Hmm.
So when you can give and it be enough, and you're fulfilled and they're fulfilled, and you practice that, you do that until that becomes your new normal, right? That becomes your natural way of being. And then the other one feels like, oh, this sucks, like it's never enough, rather than, oh, I just have to do this because this is the only thing I know. So you're literally learning a new way of being in the world just by practicing these movements in a different way. All of
Hmm.
that translates to practical real life stuff. This isn't just theoretical stuff. This is insanely practical because you're doing it in your body, and that correlates with real results in your real life.
So, what are the big actions that we do, whether symbolically or actually? Give, receive. What are the what else?
Yeah, give, receive. Um, let's see. Well, it's a lot. There's a lot of archetypes. Um,
Hmm.
let's just talk about the things that came up here, right? All right. So give and receive, being accepted, being playful, having fun, right? If I asked you, I mean, we don't have a lot of time here, but if you were doing a
Yeah.
session with me, if you were a client, right, I would say, all right, show me having fun, show me playful. All right, well, do the opposite, do it differently, find a new way to move. Those are all ones for you that I would suggest because those are relevant to you. There's other ones like making money, spending money, right? People coming in. All right, well, what does it look like to make money, spending money? And you'd be amazed. I mean, doing this hundreds and hundreds of people, you start seeing patterns. You're like, oh, wow. When people can't pay their bills, this is the kind of thing that they do. This is how this feels like. People that are making tens of millions of dollars are successful, they do something and feel completely different than those people. Oh, right. And so by doing the movements, you can not only reveal where you're at, but you can start moving in a new way that is more functional. So we've had people come in, I've had people come in, add one, two, three zeros to their income, get just stuff out of the blue, job offers, deals. Um, we're not talking about business strategy. It's all about here. I have this lady, she read my book. She hasn't done any work. She just read my book. She's lost 40 pounds. She's all off all of her um, medications, um, just from making new choices and realizations from the book. So this stuff is insanely practical, and it shows up in all areas of life. Remember, how you do one thing is how you do everything. So it doesn't matter what the topic is. It doesn't matter what the topic is. You can get specific, um, but how you do one thing is how you do anything. And if you find a new way to move in your body that correlates to something in your life, you do that enough, it rewires those neural pathways. And then when you go to do that thing for real in your life, you have this new feeling, right? You're rewired in this more functional way. And so there's no strategies, there's no new tactics to learn. You just naturally just show up that way. So in exchange for the confronting, intense shadow work in the beginning and the willingness and courage to go into these places, the result is an almost permanent, lifelong joy, happiness, functionality that
Hmm.
you don't have to keep compensating with. It's just your natural way of being.
Hmm.
It's embodied.
Yeah, that gives me some great ideas. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Wow. I don't know how I just keep going on with my day after this, but I'm going to try. Thanks for leading me through all of that. That was really profound.
You're welcome. Thanks for your great questions and your willingness to do this and your courage to do it in front of your audience. I hope that through your leadership and your courage and your willingness, that everyone listening or watching will get something from this.
Thank you. Me too. All right. Well, Andrew, thanks for being a repeat guest here on the Better Man podcast. And guys, I hope you enjoyed the episode. Make sure you go check out Andrew's book because it's got all the stuff here that we talked about. Awaken to your true self. So, all right. We'll see you guys later. Thanks again, Andrew.
All right. Thanks, Dean.
If you like that episode, check out this other one right here. I think you're really going to enjoy it. If you haven't subscribed, click this subscribe button over here, and you can listen to the full episodes on any major podcasting platform. Full details below in the description.